Welcome to Hats Off. You know, when you talk about taking hats off, Billy, we take our hats off at different times during the day. So, that comes with it. But I'm your host, Dr. James McKnight, psychiatrist specializing in men's mental health. Today on Hats Off, we are talking about unmasking toxic masculinity. Our podcast is dedicated to exploring the complexities of mental health and therapy for men. In a world where vulnerability is often equated with weakness, we're here to challenge those norms and create a safe space for honest conversation. Today, we are joined by William Council, also referred to as Billy or Coach Billy. Billy is a Harlem native and a busy, multi-hyphenated brother that includes being an entrepreneur, a community advocate, a film producer, a coach, and a mentor. As the founder of Sunday Dinner, a nonprofit organization whose primary mission is to inspire, empower, and equip young men of color, he is dedicated to fostering a positive change within the community, particularly for those often marginalized. Welcome, Billy. Welcome,
brother.
man. I'm so glad you decided to do this for me. It's really great to see you. And like I mentioned, we talk about taking off our caps, but that can come in time. And sometimes when we talk about taking off our caps, what does that kind of mean to you?
For me, it's just like, just letting loose, just being your vulnerable self. And,
Exactly.
being able to just say the things you want to say, do the things you want to do, and feel the way that you want to feel. Right.
Exactly.
So many times, especially in our community, we wear this armor, whether this armor's on our chest or the armor on our hats.
Exactly. And so you're exactly right. And we know that we hide under hats. We know that women sometimes hide on the makeup or whatever, under wigs or whatever. So we're here to say we want to take that off and get down to the nitty gritty.
That's right. Take them hats off.
That's right.
Brothers.
Take them off and let's address some issues.
Absolutely.
When it comes to toxic masculinity, it's literally killing us. Unfortunately, the suicide rate of young African-American males, and you and I are very interested in working with young men. That's kind of what drives us, has been skyrocketing for the past 10 years. And the question is why? Why is this happening? Well, as I stated before, joining me is Billy here, my friend, and we want to get down and talk a little bit more about this.
Well, James, first of all, I just want to say it's good to be here with you and, to help you launch this show, which means a lot to us in our community. I think that's amazing. First, it's just ironic. How did you come up with this concept? Like, I think the concept is dope, right? How do you come up with the concept of, take your hats off?
Right. And like what we stated previously, taking your hats off has many connotations. I know as men, we wear various hats throughout the day. And so it's time to stop hiding and just and then it just kind of popped in my head one day. It said hats off with Dr. James McKnight. So I was like, that's it. And it kind of stuck, But we're in crisis and we need to take our hats off, be vulnerable, and address these major issues facing us.
You know what? It's interesting. But, one of the things that I'm really interested in knowing is, like, with your vast experience, what made you focus specifically on mental health and men and why? And why now?
Right. And this is a unique time in our country, and I think a very important time when it comes to men, particularly Black men, Hispanic men, white men. All of us are going through major mental health issues affecting us detrimentally, which of course affects our relationships to those who are significant to others, significant to us, but also our interaction with our employers, our employees, and even those we meet on the street. Additionally, depression and suicide are the leading cause of death among men, with 6 million occurring each year. That is just
6 million?
6 million.
Wow.
Suicide ranked as the third leading cause of death among African-American males between the ages of 15 and 19. Unfortunately, a lot of these suicides are occurring because we're not seeking the help we need. And that's why we're here today, Billy.
Mm.
We're here to encourage people to seek the help that they need. I personally was taken aback by the recent death of the young 24-year-old football player, Marshawn.
You're from Dallas.
Nealon, yes, the Cowboy, yes, who, had a parent dream job. He wanted to be a football player. He was a football player. And what looked like a beautiful relationship and expecting a child. But there's something called clinical depression, which we'll discuss more in depth on later episodes of Hats Off.
But think about this. He also lost his mother just before the draft, right? So we don't really deal with that piece too, that grief. That grief. And we think because we made it and we got drafted that,
exactly, that
goes away, but absolutely not.
Right. And certainly we're going to dedicate some time to talk about grief and grieving and what that means.
Yeah, because I'm still going through that grieving process of losing my mom on Thanksgiving, last year. So it's tough.
That definitely. I've worked with countless of men who have struggled with anxiety and depression in its various forms. And their depression and anxiety are often made worse by maybe toxic relationships, the pressures of societal expectations, and what's now termed, of course, what we've been talking about is toxic masculinity. I believe that therapy can be a powerful tool for men to navigate and address these challenges and live a more fulfilling life. So yes, we must demystify and totally address the misinformation regarding therapy. For a man to fully engage in therapy, they must begin to unmask. I'm not saying that it's immediate unmasking. No, it takes some time. For most men, it will be gradual. It's not easy for any man, woman, or even a child, I guess, to unmask. But what it is, because societal norms have taught us that to be a man, you must be uncaring and unaffected. But we are not here to talk about politics today. But we see a lot of that coming from that White House. There's this uncaring, unaffected person. But we're not here to talk about politics today. Also, it's important to understand that there are different types of therapy that men can engage in. There's individual therapy, there's group therapy, there's psychodynamic therapy, psychoanalytic therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. And I will spend time explaining those on later episodes of Hats Off.
So why, just from your opinion, why do you think so many men is hesitant seeking therapy? Why do you think we fight so much against that?
Right. Well, I think that some of it has to do with the lack of accessibility in our communities and a lack of affordability. I think some of that. But as I stated previously, we live in a culture that tells men to be strong and to be resilient. I can do it on my own. But these messages can be incredibly damaging, leading to isolation, emotional suppression, and a reluctance to reach out for support. But I think it's important for me to say vulnerability is not a weakness, and that's what it takes. In fact, it's a strength. It takes courage to acknowledge your struggles and to seek help. And guess what? It's men who can do that.
It is men that can do that, but the struggling piece is where we have to kind of like help them with, right? Like with all of us, right? We struggle with saying, I need help. So how do you recommend when you're going through that struggle, if someone's out there that's listening to us right now, how would we address them and say, hey, when you're struggling, these are some of the things that you may be able to do?
Sure. And that's what we're trying to lead them, push them over toward being able to accept help, being able to see that therapy isn't a viable option for them. But you're right. Sometimes they simply are not there. And sometimes it takes someone who's close to them to really, to help them listen and really take on what we're trying to say. So sometimes it's the messenger, how you say it, the way you say it. But I think that we're coming around to it, that more men are being a little bit more open to the possibility of doing therapy.
I think now that we're talking about it and so many different people are saying it's okay, I think that's what, one of the things that I would recommend that we do is just kind of continue to, not walk in silence, right? I remember saying this one time that we're losing women in labor rooms, but we're
Mhm.
losing Black men in silence,
Yes.
right?
Definitely.
So I just think that's something that we gotta
I
work
agree
on.
with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And as we talked about, that suicide rate is, but we have to address it. So we kind of entitle this talk of toxic masculinity, and I want to just try to just talk just a little bit more about it. It promotes a destructive behavior such as lack of empathy,
Mhm.
aggression, domination, and control. I mean, unfortunately, there has been a rash of men killing their significant other here in New York City and across the country. That intense anger and the need to control. Ladies, beware. Ladies, beware. But there's something called a healthy masculinity, and of course, there's nothing wrong with being masculine. But I think that we need to change the profile of what we mean about masculinity. The profile such that being accepting of men when they're vulnerable, letting them put themselves in a vulnerable position. Men can exhibit emotional expressions. Men can cry. Why not? Articulate their feelings without feeling emasculated. Engage in open conversation and hopefully seek professional help and consider therapy as a viable option, which we've been talking about.
So have things gotten better, say over the last decade or so, as far as men feeling comfortable in admitting they need help? Also, I would love for you to explain what you mean by help. Is it
Mhm.
just therapy,
Mhm.
or can it come in other impactful forms?
Sure. Yes, like I've stated previously, we've come a bit. We're improving some with men actually seeking out therapy. I may have mentioned to you that I do work in some of the low cost clinics here in the city, so I do see more men coming in and willing to stick with it and do therapy, but not enough, especially our young Black men. I do believe that I know that therapy can provide a safe and supportive environment, a space to explore deep feelings, deep emotions, and develop healthier coping skills as opposed to unhealthier coping skills. And we know some of those, the mechanisms such as intense anger, drugs, alcohol, excessive gambling, even sex addiction, and ultimately, suicide.
Hmm.
Now, Billy, you do a lot of work in the community with a particular focus on young men, especially as a coach. I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of pressures over the years, both personally and professionally, and you have seen what other boys and men are dealing with or not dealing with. How how have you navigated these things throughout your career? Have you ever sought out therapy yourself?
You know what? I'm going to take that question from the back and work my way
Mm-hmm.
up to the beginning. I didn't think I really got into therapy until, I would say, right after the last election when I
Mm-hmm.
ran for city council in District 9,
Mm-hmm.
and I lost, and I became depressed.
Yes.
And, I walked around with this toxic toughness,
Mm-hmm.
right? I didn't really talk too much about my depression or the things that I went through. And it's like, you know, I walked outside, and every time before I walked out that door, I put that hat on. And that hat signified that I was okay,
Mm.
that I had it all put together. But then every time I walk back in the house, you do what? You take your mask, your hat off,
Yes.
your mask off, and then you start to move, with that low esteem. And, for me, and it takes me back a little bit when you asked about our young men,
Mm-hmm.
it was tough for me because, I started being a mentor, being a coach after getting shot 6 times and left dead in my community.
Wow.
And one of the things that I wanted to do was
You
try to
said shot 6 times?
yeah, 6 times. Yeah, in my building.
So
on
you're
the
a walking
staircase.
miracle.
Yeah, I'm a walking blessing, right? And I guess that's one of the reasons why giving back to young men and men of color has been so
Mm-hmm.
important to me,
Mm-hmm.
because service is the price that we
Yes.
pay for being on this earth, right? So I try to make sure that I give back and do the things. But what I wanted to do is try to be a vessel for young people
Yes.
and give them alternatives,
Right.
and that was one of the things that I constantly said that I needed to do.
Sure.
But one of the things when we have these conversations, especially when I have conversations with young men, I had someone come to me and say, therapy is good, but do I need a therapist?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Right? And I had to think about that.
Mm-hmm,
It was like,
mm-hmm,
therapy is good, but
Right,
do
right.
I need a therapist?
Right.
Right? And the other thing, to take you back to question, one of the things that you said is, it's important for us to find someone to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
So, my question to you is, and this is probably an off-base question, but do you believe everyone needs therapy, or do you think everyone needs a therapist?
Well, I think that is the therapist, working with the therapist is going to provide you with the therapy, but it's not always, people are not always ready there. You got to kind of work with young men, anyone, where they are. So no, you can start to get comfortable with being vulnerable, with talking openly in forums such as with your program, Sunday dinners. I've had the opportunity to attend Sunday dinners, and I was both surprised and impressed with how open the men talked about their feelings regarding their various relationships. Many of the men admitted to even crying. I do remember that. That kind of stuck in my mind.
Mm.
So, Billy, if you will, please share with us a bit about Sunday dinner and what that's all about.
So Sunday dinner was created, just out of necessity for Black men,
Mm-hmm.
men of color, to
Sure.
have a place to come and talk about issues that's plaguing them in their community, in their life, in their family, without being judged. But one of the things that I wanted to do, I wanted to give it two different caveats, right? I want to make sure whatever topic that we talked about, we had a health professional there
Sure.
to make sure that we guide the conversation. Like when I asked you to come as a professional,
Yes.
to give them the professional part of, the support that they need,
Certainly.
right? And then second thing was, people think is about sons, right? Sons and fathers, right?
Yes.
And I always say, no. One thing that every man has at their table, they may not be a father, may not be a husband, but they are someone's son.
Yes.
So that was the premise behind Sunday
That's
dinner.
very
Like
true.
I wanted you
That's
to come and be a son,
I like that.
right? So that was that's what we do with Sunday dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, as we sit here and we and we talk, and I know we have talked a few times off a line, can you just elaborate, to Black men, the importance of having someone to talk to,
Right. Right.
having someone like why is that so important?
Right.
To be able to say, you know what, James, can we just talk about things that I'm going through, and like, what is that process? What does that look like?
Right. And that's where you talk about that vulnerability that we talked about. To be able to say, you know what, I need help. And it's often very difficult for Black men. And we often see our fathers, they didn't. We kind of model behind them. But it's really time to set that aside. This is a new time. This is a new age. America is going through quite a bit that we're all dealing with. So we all need help. And I think that if men like yourself who stand up and say, I fought with depression. I mean, seen other individuals who they respect, coach, this person, that person. I know a number of the actors have come forth or whatever. So this is so important to kind of move the needle toward men seeking and getting the help that they need.
I love that. I love that so much. And, this platform is so great. Like, and honestly, I'll say it with all sincereness, thank you again. But one of the things that I really want to get to the nitty gritty, what are some other things that you're going to be talking about?
Sure.
Give me some of the good stuff. Well, I can, when people listen, they're like, oh, I want to hear this episode when James talk about X, Y, and Z.
Exactly. Yes. Well, one thing that we certainly need to look at is the trauma that we all are experiencing. And the technical name is post-traumatic stress disorder. But it's the trauma. We've had trauma in our childhoods, even as teenagers and as adults now. We're dealing with a lot of trauma. So we're definitely going to look at that. Our families, our wife, kids of divorce, parents, all these things, our romantic relationships, our toxic relationships, that affect us tremendously. Also, we talked about the grief and the grieving. We've all lost people and we will continue to lose people. So that's important that we look at that. What about incarceration as the new slavery? Incarceration is a big moneymaker. In many younger days, when I worked in a lot of the prisons around town, and even Rikers when I came back here. So I know. I'm not just talking about what I think. I know. I've worked there. And I wanted to kind of work with young men. And so I got that opportunity, which was great. We could talk more specifically about illness, psychiatric illness, depression. There's clinical depression, like we said. This young man who, football player, we everything looked great there, but, was he grieving? Was there some clinical depression? Anxiety disorders, bipolar disorder. There's a type 1 and a type 2. And bipolar disorder has a very high rate of suicide. Substance abuse disorder. We could talk about medications. Sometimes people want to know about those. What is an antidepressant? What's an anti-anxiety medication? What's an antipsychotic medication? All these things we want to educate our young men about so that they can be informed. And being informed is a step toward, getting the help that you need.
So what's like, as you think about it and you think about like November, as we were, we're sitting here talking, November is Men's Mental Health Month.
Mm-hmm.
Besides, some of the things that we talking about, what are some of the things you think men should do while they are, going through the process of whatever they're going through, right? Whether it's financially, whether it's emotionally, whether it's family-wise, like give me some of the things that you think men should be doing to kind of like just help them get through it.
Sure. Well, I think that you kind of put it nicely, like what should you be doing? And a lot of times it has to do with assessing where you are. A lot of times we don't want to do that. That's part of just kind of pushing aside, I'm strong, I can do this. But to actually sit down and start to assess where you are, maybe develop a list, look, the year's about up. What have I accomplished through the year? What did I not feel good about? Who did I lose? Those type of things like that, which really kind of put some organization around what you need to do. And also you can always go back and look at that list. So that's sometimes we don't think about that, but I think that could be quite helpful. And then also, you like you said, you find your confidence, people you're close to, you can talk to, identify someone.
Do you think it's because I see that we're gonna start talking about relationships. Last week at Sunday dinner, I had this conversation with a young man, and when he was talking about picking a therapist, he said that he didn't want to pick a woman therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of like, and I know he gave me his reasons, but do you find that that's a struggle that a lot of men have?
I do find that is a struggle with that a lot of men have. But you know what? Sometimes, obviously, there's some uncomfortability around him working with a woman. But sometimes that's where you need to be. And I often tell patients that when you're kind of pushing back from doing this, that, or seeing this particular person, or a white person, a black person, a woman, a female, you probably need to see them because there's some issues there. So,
but you know what, James?
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm going to take it a little bit further, and I'm going to be vulnerable here. I remember my first time going to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I was making sure that I didn't pick a woman therapist,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I didn't want to pick a woman therapist because I didn't want to be attracted to her and not be vulnerable,
Right.
100% vulnerable, right? Because I didn't want her to think of me in a lesser role of something, right? So when he said that, I was just like, wow, I'm not the only one who feels that, right?
Exactly. So yes, exactly, yes. So it's interesting. And listening to other people too, it's amazing if you become vulnerable, what they say can impact you and make you start to think about, wow, I was there. So that's what it's all about, that exchange and that's coming together.
Yeah.
And I'm so delighted that you put together something called Sunday Dinner. How often do you do it?
So we do Sunday dinner probably every other month.
That's awesome, buddy.
Yeah.
I was invited on Father's Day.
Yeah.
No, was it
Yeah,
Father's Day?
Father's Day. Yeah, you was at
So I was
Father's
thinking
Day.
that you do it annually, but I missed that point. That's awesome.
So Father's Day is the annual one,
Right.
like the big one, right? Because I think, Mother's Day, and nothing against mothers, but mothers get roses, they get they get everything, right? As they should, right? But sometimes you got to look around and say, you know what? Dad deserves a night to be, a day to be pampered and, have lunch, and a good lunch, and not just, a pair of socks.
Right.
So I wanted to put that together. And, that is one of the things that I love to do when I see my brothers and they come out with their sons, and it's like, we have the sons do, affirmations to their dad and let their dads know how much work, that they played in their, in their lives and stuff like that. So I just think that was really important.
Right, right. So I think that we're going to do a call to action,
Absolutely.
If you're a man who's been struggling in silence, I encourage you to reach out for help. Therapy can be a life-changing experience. And remember, you're not alone. Billy and I are here, and many other men are here. You are not alone. I think we could take these hats off now, Billy.
Yeah, man, my hat was ready to come off as soon as we sat down. I just couldn't get to it. But you know what? One thing that I want to do before we leave and before we take our hats completely off, James, before we leave, can you give one mental health tip to the brothers out there?
Sure. I would say your mental health is just not your health. You know what I mean? Sometimes we think it's just us, but really your mental health affects your significant others, your kids, your employers, those who are around you. So it's real important, number one, for you, but for all those who you interact with. So let's take care of ourselves so that we can be a positive force in the community like you are.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you for listening to Unmasking Toxic Masculinity with Dr. James McKnight here on Hats Off. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. And if you're struggling with your mental health, please reach out to a qualified mental health professional. Thank you.
Before we go, we'd like to take time out and say thanks to our podcast community recording here in Harlem, who worked to bring you this episode. Thanks to producers Leonard DePlunk, Paula Farmer, and Jack Hamill. Jack and Leonard on the soundboard and camera, our tech heads. Vanessa McKnight and Cheney McKnight. Stephen Williams, who is mostly in the shadows these days. David Aaron of Short Memory Records. Super special, big Harlem thank you to Coach Billy Council. Thanks for being with us today, Coach. You have been listening to Hats Off with Dr. James McKnight. Be well. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice. Please consult with a healthcare professional regarding any health conditions or concerns. Help is available. Speak with someone today. Dial 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Languages are in English and Spanish. Hours are 24/7. If you need help, please speak with someone today.